This Baldur's Gate 3 patch is absolutely massive. There are brand new difficulty and gameplay modes, a new set of dice for you to earn and add to your collection, entirely new sections to the game, and much, much more. I have combed through all 1,000 plus notes so that I can bring you the best bits right here, right now. So let's start with the notes that Larian have identified as the highlights, then I'll deep dive into some more of the other juicy new changes. Firstly, the one I'm most excited about. As you'll see here on the difficulty screen, you've got the normal ones of Explorer, Balanced, and Tactician. And I guess people thought Tactician wasn't difficult enough, so just like they did for Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2, you now have Honor Mode. Let's take a look at the detailed overview. As you can see, this is an intense campaign recommended for experienced players. All of the bosses in the realm will now be stronger with new abilities and new legendary actions. There are also stricter rules alongside Tactician mode's regular difficulty increases, meaning that action economy and damage bonus rules are stricter towards the end of the game. Also, you have a single save file, and if your current party is entirely defeated in combat, your honor mode run will end and your save will be deleted. However, you can continue in custom mode if you wish, but it won't count as finishing an honor mode run. And most importantly, if you are victorious and do manage to beat the game in honor mode, you will be rewarded with a bespoke dice set to use in-game for future playthroughs. And finally, we have custom mode. As you can see, you can tailor every single setting you could think of, from the power of the player and their allies, to how aggressive enemies are, whether or not enemies should be allowed to crit. There are even sliders for things like proficiency bonuses, camp costs, trader prices. You can customize so many things about your playthrough now, which will make for endless amounts of fun. As we move on to the other main highlights, now in the epilogue there is an entirely new section at the end of the game after you defeat the Netherbrain, which aims to provide a well-deserved sense of closure with your allies. I'm sure, like me, you probably already have a save right at the end of the game, so you can just quickly redo the final fight and see this entirely new section. Also, there's been loads of performance improvements, especially for Act Number 3, and dynamic resolution has been added for the PS5. Also, players playing on machines with low amounts of VRAM and RAM should see improved performance. Another big one for me is, whilst you're at camp, you can now access and manage the inventories of companions who aren't in your active party. I love this change. It was such a ball out having to keep switching out characters before when you were trying to do some inventory management. This is going to make it 10 times easier. There is also now a brand new fight at Ramazith's Tower if you choose to betray Nightsong there. I wouldn't ever dream of betraying Nightsong. I love her as a character. I think she's amazing, but I think I'm going to have to just so I can see this fight. And the final main highlight from Larian is that Orin's outfit now drops as loot and is wearable by anyone, and they also gave it a suitably disgusting description and name. As we move on to some other highlights, now when you choose to become half illithid, this will also visually affect your eyes. When you meet Moll at the Guild Hall, you can now talk to her more about her contract with Raphael. The next one that caught my eye is Withers will sneakily resurrect any dead companions that fell before the final battle so they can join the ending cinematics. What a helpful skeleton. Now, this really is a bug fix in disguise. If any of your companions died, they wouldn't join the ending cinematics, which made you feel like you had to reload the fight and do it perfectly just to make sure everyone lived. Now it doesn't matter, even if you're the only survivor, everyone will join in the final cutscenes along with that new epilogue. Another big one is that they have improved the physics of characters and walls to prevent NPCs being able to shoot through ceilings inside houses. This is a weird one to have to read out loud, but I know it's been plaguing quite a few people. Made cinematic tweaks to restore sections of Astarian's Act 3 Ascendant sex scene. For all you filthy pervs out there who have been romancing Astarion, you can now once again get fully jiggy with him. A very minor one, but one I'm really excited to see in action is that the loading screen art now unlocks gradually as you progress through the game. And the final important note in the other highlights category I wanted to point out is that wild shapes that do not have weapons will now correctly benefit from having the Tavern Brawler feat. This is obviously something that always should have been, and is going to make wild shapes even more powerful and viable. Now we'll move on to the crashes and blockers section. Mostly it's just weird and wonderful crashes and a few glitches here and there preventing you from doing certain things. The one I wanted to call out, why is anyone doing this? Fix the crash when dragging an item out of your inventory while your character is dead in another inventory. Who's letting their character die and then stuffing them in someone else's bag? Sort yourself out. If your character dies, resurrect them. You're so mean. Don't stuff your character in a bag. Whoever figured out that the game crashes when this happens, you're a monster. I don't care if you ran out of resurrection scrolls. Go and buy them while leaving another character to protect your corpse. Don't stuff it in your bag. Now we'll move into the combat and balance section. To coincide with honor mode being added to the game, a fair few bosses are being tweaked and fixed and buffed, making the brand new, already daunting prospect of honor mode even more terrifying. The Hag, the Netherbrain, and Raphael have all had tweaks, fixes, and buffs. Just to give you a couple of examples, now in Tactician mode, the Hag cannot be shoved into chasms. She can cast magic after all. And to add to that, occasionally she would skip her turns, and of course this no longer happens. Also in a similar vein, the Netherbrain sometimes only cast one spell per round. Now, it will always cast multiple, so this fight is going to be particularly terrifying, especially on higher difficulties. Also, you will be pleased to know that Hope has been buffed. She now carries half plate armor and a light crossbow, and also a more powerful shield. However, Raphael has also had some tweaks and buffs, so this fight definitely won't be any easier. There have been far more combat and balance changes than I have mentioned, but they're the primary ones that will affect most players. A few more that you may be interested in are that all your gathered allies that can be summoned for the final battle in the upper city will have their resources restored if you've used them elsewhere in the adventure. Also, the Tavern Brawler feat has been fixed in regards to throwing attacks. Damage bonuses were incorrectly being applied multiple times. This is no longer the case, so if you were utilizing that cheese, that no longer works. And also, Dark Urge players will now always have the option to kill the Netherbrain in the game's final combat. You are the Dark Urge after all. As we move into the gameplay segment, there is an absolute ton of changes. This is definitely one of the heaviest segments in regards to patch notes. However, almost all of them are just bug fixes. For instance, a few of the key changes are as follows. You can now use Luck of the Far Realms even whilst disguised. Also, the reaction pop-up, which shows multiple possible reactions for multiple party members, now allows you to change your mind after picking a reaction for a party member. And also, you can no longer use the awesome force of bombs to flip the switch behind the final door in the Gauntlet of Shar to force the door open. This last one in particular is a series of cheeses that have been patched out of the game. There were many things people were doing to make the game easier than it's supposed to be by skipping sections and doing things that aren't supposed to be allowed. A lot of this gameplay section is that. So let's try and call out a few of the patch notes that aren't just bug fixes and cheese fixes. Next up, the camera system code has been improved. Sometimes, for me at least, the camera is a bit of a nightmare. It seems to overly zoom in every single time an enemy is defeated, so hopefully this will have corrected that. Next up, this is a massive one that I know people attempting a pacifist run have abused time and time again. You can no longer loot the entire inventory of unconscious traders. Instead, you will have access to a limited selection, just as you do with dead traders. Nice try, pacifist. As I say, most of the gameplay section is just a ton of bug fixes and cheese nerfs, so I'll skip through most of it. One, though, that particularly resonated with me is that they added the intensely satisfying "ah" sound for players who short rest using a keybind rather than a UI button. I've always used the UI button. I had no idea that you didn't get that sound when you did use a keybind. However, let's play it for you now just so you can hear exactly what I'm on about.
Oh, lovely little pick-me-up.
That really is an intensely satisfying sound. So I'm glad that everyone now gets to experience it. In fact, let's just hear it one more time before we move on.
Oh, lovely little pick-me-up.
As I say, the gameplay section in this patch notes is so long, but it is just a ton of bug fixes. So I won't dwell on it anymore. Let's get to some more of the juicy updates. Now, as we move into flow and scripting, as with patch 4, there has been plenty of improvements in this area as well. A few that really piqued my interest are tweaks around the romancing options. Before, if you connected with Gale during the spell teaching scene, you were kind of forced into romancing him, and this screwed me over when I was trying to romance Shadowheart, as it forced her to break up with me as she thought I was now interested in Gale. However, now if you do not wish to pursue romance with him, you are able to talk to him about Tara, and this assumably will then shut that down. And also, if you're romancing Lae'zel, once you get in her good books, she'll be less abrasive when you suggest she hang out at camp. Now, I haven't romanced Lae'zel before, so I haven't tried this one out personally, but I'm excited to find out what it is she says, because as much as I love her, she is always very blunt with you. There have been many more flow and scripting changes for each specific chapter. As you've probably guessed, most of them are all in Act 3. Another one that I absolutely love is if you choose to help Yrgir in Act 2, you will no longer need to persuade him to help you in the fight against Raphael in the House of Hope. This is massive because he has a bloody hard persuasion roll. So obviously you will still need that roll to persuade him if you didn't help him, but if you did, which I strongly advise you do, help him back in Act 2, he now will automatically join you and help you in the fight against Raphael. There have been many more great flow and scripting changes, tweaks and improvements, but they're the main ones. As we move into the last few groups of patch notes, as always there has been a load of performance and optimization improvements. Basically, it's just VRAM improvements, performance improvements, optimization improvements, all that good stuff that's going to make your game run even better and smoother for longer. And now as we move into the UI patch notes, there's some really good stuff in here. Firstly, if you're someone that really likes to look at the details and the nitty-gritty in the combat log, there's a lot more information around stealth now. A message has been added in the combat log about being spotted in stealth due to environmental light or dark vision. And also they have improved the connection between combat log messages about you losing stealth and the reason for losing it. Next up, selling and bartering has been improved, so you can now sell and barter items inside of containers when trading. You no longer have to exit out, take the items out of the containers, go back in again. That can all be done in one fluid motion. And grouping and sorting of items in containers while trading has also been improved. The last UI note that I wanted to point out is something that plagued me greatly. This happened with every single container I looted. It wouldn't close after I took all the items. I had to manually close every single container. This has been fixed and they will now automatically close once you've taken all the items within. And the final few categories of patch notes are fairly uneventful. There's nothing really with any wow factor to shout out. There are actually a few areas in the game that have improved and or more loot, including the Worms Rock Prison, the Torturers in Moonrise Towers, and the Wraithwin Tollhouse Safe. But apart from that, the rest of the patch notes is just around animation clipping, incorrect textures that have been fixed, missing textures that have been added, lighting improvements, sound improvements, just various little fixes and tweaks to things that were not necessarily broken. They just help the game to feel a lot more complete and polished, which is really going to help with that immersion and just how beautiful the game is. For instance, a lot of animations have been tightened up, so things just look better, there's less clipping, the lighting's better, and the visual effects have been improved. So just one last thing as we're wrapping up. Anyone who was in my live stream today would have seen this happen. I did unfortunately encounter one new bug that I've never heard of before. Just after I'd saved Arabella from being killed by Korga, Gale then wanted to talk to me about his condition, and God knows what made this happen, but Korga then decided to interrupt my lovely conversation with Gale, and decided to declare me hostile to the whole grove, and everyone just started attacking me. It was so random. I literally did nothing. But there you go, that's a new one, so hopefully no one else experiences that, and hopefully that gets fixed in the next patch, because God knows what I did wrong, but she did not like me having a conversation with Gale in her house. Anyway, my friends, that is all I had for you today. Larian Studios really are making Baldur's Gate more and more perfect with every patch. It really is close to being absolute perfection, this game, and I love it so much. I truly hope it wins Game of the Year next week. Anyway, on that note, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.